Hi, I'd like to introduce all the chords we're going to be using in our next unit. And to start this off, let's look at this simple progression, 1-5-1. This is the most important progression in tonal music. We'll find it on the small scale, going fast. It can also happen in the large scale. Say we have a 10-minute symphony movement that starts in the tonic and over time modulates to the dominant and then by the end of the movement comes back to the tonic in a large scale movement, moving from home to a departure and then having a return. Let's label these chords by something that we'll call function. 1 functions as a tonic chord, 5 functions as a dominant chord, and the return to 1 brings us back to tonic. I'll write this word here. And we'll define it as the role that a chord plays in our musical grammar. It's much like learning the parts of speech where we have a sentence made of nouns and verbs. Chords have their role to play in a musical statement. They can either be tonic, or they can be dominant, or there are a couple of other things they can be, like dominant preparation, which we'll get to next week. But the most important functions are the tonic and the dominant. From within that, this is really the engine that drives tonal music. It's the resolution of dominant to tonic. Now, these are the chords that we're going to be using in our next unit, and all of them are either dominant or tonic chords, and it's easy to know which is which just by looking at the numerals. The first thing you're going to do on your worksheet is label them as either one or the other. So let's just get this started. A 1 chord obviously is tonic, 5 chord is dominant, 5-6 chord, that's just an inversion of the 5 chord, but it has the same function. 7-6 contains a leading tone. It's built on the leading tone, which likes to resolve to tonic. So 7-6 falls into the category of dominant because it's a chord that resolves strongly to tonic, so I'll put this as dominant. 1-6, of course, is tonic because it's simply an inversion of 1. And 5-7 is an intensification of 5, so that's dominant as well. So the first thing you're going to do is just think about those identities and write either tonic or dominant in those blanks there. The next thing it says to do on the sheet is play, listen to, and discuss 1, 1-6, 5, 5-6, 5-7, and 7-6 chords. Mix up the orders. Which combinations make the strongest arrivals? Which are weaker with smooth, stepwise bass lines? All right, so let's discuss that a little bit. The idea of strength of arrival is something composers are really concerned about, because you want to have a very strong arrival at certain times in a piece of music, like maybe at the very end. Other times when the music is flowing along, you may want to arrive on tonic, but do it much more smoothly, or you could say in a weaker way. And depending on which of these chords and inversions you select, you can create different impressions. Here are 4 little snippets of bass lines, and we can talk about the kind of arrival we get. All of them arrive to tonic, but they do it in different ways. To be able to analyze these, let's recognize that this is our universe of chords here that we've just talked through, and that each of these chords comes with its own bass note that we're able to match with it. So in this first measure, we've got 4 bass notes, and if we have to match a chord to a bass note, there's almost only one choice for each bass note. So we know that if we're in the key of C major, like this, that C is going to have to represent, out of all these possibilities, it can only represent a 1 chord. You agree? Similarly, when we have an E in the bass, the only one of these chords that can go with an E in the bass is the 1/6 chord. The G could be the bass note for two of these, actually, the 5 or the 5/7. Let's just put a 5 there. And then the C, of course, tells us that we have a 1 chord. So now we have a little progression. 1, 1/6, 5, 1. This is what we call a strong arrival. The last two chords, root position 5 to root position 1. It sounds very final. It could be the end of a piece. Let's look at the next little snippet. Well, that E has to represent a 1/6 chord. You see that now, right? The B, there's only one chord here that can have a B in the bass, and that will be the 5/6 chord. We know that from our study of our idioms. And then the C represents 1. So listen to the quality of arrival that we get when we resolve that 5/6 chord to the 1. So here's the first chord. This is a gentler arrival because the bass is not doing the strong falling fifth motion of the previous one. Now it's a smooth, stepwise motion, just the leading tone coming up, and it kind of coasts into 1. So hopefully we can train our ears and get used to the feeling that an arrival like this is weaker and maybe more appropriate for the middle of a phrase or the middle of a piece. And this strong root position arrival is more appropriate for climactic moments or a big ending. Let's look at this. You might recognize this bass line, 3-2-1. We have that in one of our idioms. And the chords in that idiom, we can choose from this list up here to put this together. There's only one way this can go using the chords in this unit. 1/6, 7/6 to 1. Let's listen to that. And at the last moment, the last two chords resolves with a stepwise motion in the bass, which also weakens the arrival, makes it more of a smooth coasting in. So we have another gentler arrival. For our last example, let's put the Roman numerals on. That G can represent a 5 or a 5/7 chord. Again, we'll simplify things and just make it a 5. We know that a B in the bass, if we're choosing from this table, has to be a 5/6 chord. And then we come to 1. What we can notice here is we start on a root position 5 chord, and we're about to make a strong arrival on 1, but before we get to 1, we weaken that 5 chord by inverting it to get the B in the bass and then have a gentler arrival to 1. If we skip the 5/6 chord, we just have 5/1, but as it is, it makes a gentler arrival. All right, so we've done activity number 2, which we would normally do in class. Listen to, discuss, how do you get a weaker arrival? How do you get a stronger arrival? How do you get a smooth stepwise bass line? Well, it's usually by using an inverted 5 chord and having that resolve to tonic. All right. Now, you get to do some writing. On the two systems below, write bass lines and quarter notes to match the chord progressions. So this is really just knowing what bass notes go with these chords. We're in the key of C major, so this is very easy, what we were just doing. The bass note for a 1 chord in C major is a C. 7/6 chord is a D. You know this already. 1/6 chord, so there's our idiom 6 already. 5/6 to 1 to 1/6. So just go through and use your knowledge of these chords to write the bass lines. Now, in number 4, add simple melody fragments that fit the harmonies. Use only chord tones. write mostly stepwise motion to make an outer voice structure with smooth lines. So here we've got 1, 2, 3 in the bass. We're going to have to write something in the soprano that makes nice counterpoint with it. Write good counterpoint. On the C major staff, try for mostly contrary motion. Well, maybe you have an idea already how you could do this. It's actually quite simple because we know we're working with a 1 chord, and the only possible notes we're allowed to use are chord tones. So here they are. These are possible notes we're going to put in the staff: a E, a G, or a C. Then for the 7/6 chord, we can have an F, a B, or a D, and we're just going to find our way through this, connecting the dots. The 1/6 chord has to either be a C, E, G, or C. Those are the chord tones. Now we're going to select ones that make a stepwise line, and it tells us on the C major staff, try for mostly contrary motion. So since the bass line is going up by step, that's why I chose notes that will go down by step. And I can see here there's a nice path there. If I choose E, D, and C, I have contrary motion between the soprano and bass, and that's good. That's very good voice leading. Fill in these bass lines and then write little melodic fragments that fit with the bass lines to make a nice outer voice structure. You may recognize this, what I've just written here, as being exactly the same as what you have in your idiom number 6. That's the outer voice structure. From here, you can go on to the next video where more of this sheet is discussed.